Hello, I'm John Abernethy, an economist. I'm here to answer your questions posted on YouTube. So let's have a look at the questions. First question, is the BRICS issue more of a concern than America's tariffs? Not quite sure what the BRICS issue is. The BRICS is a whole lot of emerging economies driven by China. They've been coming together for quite a number of years as a counter-action towards the G7, quite logical. They're fast-growing economies. Obviously the South African part of it's probably got some issues. The Russian involvement is obviously of some concern, but India, China and Brazil obviously is significant economies, significant opportunities in international trade. Are they more of a concern than America's tariffs? Let's say, is it from an Australian perspective? Australia should be everyone's friend. I always say that. We've got interesting commodities to export, energy, metals, agricultural goods. We should sell it to the world. Doesn't matter whether it's America, doesn't matter whether it's BRICS. So my answer to that is, I don't think either is a concern to Australia. The second question, or a question. Aussies cannot resist free lunch at the canteen. You can tell them you're better off learning how to cook, but they want that handout. I'm not quite sure what that means, but anyway, the free lunch at the canteen, I sort of think that went out a long time ago. I remember when I started work, part of the working for a mutual, Anna and May, I remember we used to have a canteen, and from memory we paid a very low price. It was part of the package. I also worked at Westpac in the 80s in the head office, and I think we had a canteen, but I think it was, again, discounted prices. Having a free lunch, I think that's long past. I don't think there are any free lunches. Yes, we would be better off teaching people how to cook. I think what we're trying to do is upskill Australia. Australia has a significant shortage of skills across the economy. We know what they are. We can do it two ways. We can immigrate that skill, but much better to train our own population in terms of developing skills which are important for Australia's growth. So let's leave the free lunch aside. Let's go to skills enhancement, educational training and driving Australia's growth. We have a real productivity issue. Better education, better training will fix that. So if that's the point of the question, I agree with you. Another question, looks like a long one. Energy costs have blown out of proportion. For a start, Australia does not have the world's most expensive electricity by a long shot. I have a 4-bedroom house with a swimming pool and pay around $1,600 per year, which covers heating and the pool. I will be getting solar panels and batteries soon, which will eliminate that altogether and generate a small revenue stream. With a low interest loan, I will have some of the lowest energy costs in the world. The household battery rebate scheme is fabulous public policy which will help stabilise the grid and lower electricity prices for everyone. Let's stop whinging and get on with it. Well, whether your analysis is correct, I agree, we should get on with something. I too have, on my small farm, I have solar. I need to connect batteries. If I do that, my electricity bill, which is running at probably 3 times your one on the farm, around $5,000 per annum, which seems hideous. It's doubled in the last 3 years. I need to work on a scheme to get that down. Solar panels have obviously had some impact. My sellback price to the grid is being virtually cut to nothing, so I'm not getting a benefit there. When do I take the plunge, which is what you're suggesting you're going to do, and invest in batteries? Now, what you haven't considered there is the capital cost of batteries. You just assume that it happens. It could be north of $20,000 to properly have the batteries in place. Now, there will be some rebates, there might be some concessional loans. Let's see how that one plays out. The biggest issue you and I have, apart from the capital cost, is the quality of the battery. We need to ensure it's first class. It's not going to have any issues with it. And the other issue is technology. As we know, technology is developing batteries very, very fast and their quality is improving. That's from a consumer perspective and an economic thought process. Do we go with batteries now or do we wait a few more years and get a better battery? I would prefer to take your point further, is the Australian government and maybe our superannuation system creates a leasing capability. So rather than buy batteries, we lease them, which allows us to replace batteries as better batteries come forward. So rather than forcing households like you and me to buy batteries, I'd like to see something more significant, which is a leasing facility given to households. Now, whether solar is the answer to all our needs, I'm not quite sure either, but it's good that we're moving. Whether that's the right policy, time will tell. But I'm in your camp. Let's move on solar as much as possible, but let's make sure it works before we fully commit. A long question. Another question from YouTube. Feel helpless to live in Sydney. There are so many issues, especially the housing crisis. Just want to move to other places from Australia. Life is full of stress. Not happy life anymore. The government really needs to fix the problem soon. If they miss the chance, there will be 2 or 3 generations that will be really suffering because of this. I would really like to escape this country. Well, that's a little bit negative. You know, Australia, on a lot of perspectives, is the best place in the world to live. Free country, good legal system, democracy, freedom of speech. Certainly a place where if you want to do hard work, you can succeed. I think what you're stressing there, or what you're focusing on, is the cost of living crisis, and certainly the cost of buying a house, which is, you know, when you talk about we're setting up 2 or 3 generations, hence to be in trouble. I think we're already in trouble with the current generation, the younger part of our generation, our kids and grandchildren. So I take your point. The Australian government, and probably the Australian Parliament as a whole, needs to address the housing affordability issue. It's not going to disappear. It's not going to be fixed by magically increasing supply by 100,000 houses. It's not being improved by getting the mortgages, the cost of mortgages down with the RBA. It's not going to be improved by underwriting deposits of first home buyers. Not going to be improved by getting rid of stamp duty. We actually need, when you think about it, to get the price of housing down, and that's quite a painful exercise. My view is either we manage the price of houses down, or the market will do it for us. Now, if we go to the second point, the market doing it for us would be a financial calamity, a credit crunch, credit crisis of some sort. The management of the housing market down, how would that occur? It would be quite directed credit controls over the banking system, the requirement for higher deposits, not cutting interest rates to a ridiculous level where we look after borrowers, less so savers, because Australia needs also to save and build a capital base. The next question which should come into your mind is, well, okay, if the houses drop, what happens to all those loans where people have negative equity and banks have, you know, security below what they've lent to people at? That's where a government sector comes in by direction and takes over a portion of the housing market off the banks on the mission that the housing prices are too high and too much debt's being loaded on those houses, and the banking system, free market system, can't work it out. It has to be directed to a government sector. Unfortunately, it's a taxpayer, very much like what happened in America with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac in the GFC. So don't be alarmed by it. This is how workouts occur. The alternative workout is we have a financial calamity, and guess what happens? The government underwrites the banks. So you either underwrite the bank or you underwrite the borrowers. It's the same thing. So I take your point. Every day that passes, every day that housing prices go up, becomes very stressful for a household sector which is trying to build a family, trying to build a life in Australia. It needs to be addressed. The question here from YouTube, it's all corrupt politicians and big business and banks. Quite a stark comment. Well, that'd be very disappointing, very distressing if everyone was corrupt. I'm not of that school. I think the overwhelming majority of business people, and indeed the overwhelming majority of politicians, and indeed the overwhelming majority of people, are honest. There is always a dishonest part to society, and it's incumbent on the administration to weed it out. I do take the point, though, as we go through it, in terms of politicians, you know, there is a debate going on whether we pay politicians enough, on the basis that we want the best of society, the best thinkers to come into politics and derive policy, debate policy, and implement policy. So that's what we want from our politicians, and we have to do it. There's no doubt in the marketplace, reward does drive people towards that reward. Now, it'd be nice if it didn't happen, where the whole economy was mutual. That's not what we are. So if we want to get the best of breed into politics, we have to offer some incentive. Having said that, once you offer that, then society has to come down very hard on corrupt politicians. So corruption by a politician who's in a favoured space, well rewarded, well respected, if they defy that, then they have to take very serious consequences. So that's that issue. In terms of big business, I think it's more a function of defining business by those who are business builders, people who have created businesses, founders, families who have built businesses over a long period of time and took the risk at the early stages of their business to build something and take the long-term view that reinvest profits and back into a business. I define them differently to people who come in as corporate managers on a contract and want an incredible amount of money to run businesses. Now, some businesses are very difficult, very intricate, and it does need highly paid executives, although you need highly skilled more than you want highly paid. I think there needs to be some understanding that professional managers, as opposed to founders, are different types of people. But leave that one aside. Where big business comes along or presents as being corrupt, when there are excessive wages and excessive bonuses paid for someone who's really a transitional manager. So they didn't set the business up, and they're not going to take huge equity risk, and they're going to move on from that contract in 3 or 5 years' time. That's where I think it's not corruption, but it is something which society has to be very careful about. What's a fair reward for someone managing a business which they didn't establish, which really is business as usual? They're just driving the business to maintain a growth profile. Is that something which should be so excessively rewarded for them as a leader of that company at multiples and multiples of the people who are working down below and actually making the business operate? I think clearly in America, for instance, I think the top end salaries have got totally out of kilter with the mainstream worker. And I don't think it's created a great result. You can say, look, the American stock market's performed fantastically, but has it performed right across the market? That's debatable. That's not, the evidence suggests that it's magnified in a few stocks. I think Wall Street, which should have been cleaned out in terms of, rewards during the GFC, didn't take its medicine. And I think, unfortunately, to an extent, Australia follows a lot of precedents set in America without thinking about whether it's right. I think Australia, you can be well rewarded if you do hard work and you take risk and you succeed. I think there's too much reward given for people who didn't take a lot of risk, who didn't really have a vision and really haven't changed the world or changed their business or changed the company they work for. So I take your sentiment, but I think the word of corruption is probably wrong. So we've covered those questions. Thanks for sending those questions in. I promise you, I just read the questions out the first time I saw them, but they're questions coming from new followers of Climb, new subscribers. Thanks for joining us. We have well over 800 now followers. We're moving quickly, and it's the interaction which I think, which I look forward to. Very happy to answer questions if they come through on anything we discuss. So thanks, and I'll see you next time.